Hi, this is Janice Skychi Travels with the Skychi Travel Guide Live. And we are waiting for Greg to join us. I do see him, so he's trying to connect. He's trying to get in, and then we will start shortly. So we'll. Oh, I guess let me call him so you'll get to see behind the scenes how the Google Hangout is going, or I'll text message him, because it looks like he's having some problems getting on today. Let's see what he says. So I just sent him a text message to Greg Gross, our guest for this evening. And I hope everybody's been voting for him for the People's Choice National Geographic Traveler of the Year. You have until October 25th to vote for him. And you can vote daily. You can vote on a smartphone, a tablet, and the computer. So you can vote 3 times a day if you have all those devices. So let's see. Okay. Well, he said he just tried it. Okay. So I'm going to tell him we are waiting for him. I just sent him a text message saying, Greg, we are waiting for you. Please join us. Log on, please. Maybe I might need to call him. So, who has been voting for Greg? I think I've been voting every day since he has announced it. So I hope that you guys are voting for him as well. And let's see what, oh, okay. Oh, there Greg is.
There I am. Hey,
Yes.
Janice.
Hi, Greg. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
All right.
We're glad to have you join us.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Yes, yes. So I was just telling everybody to continue to vote for you until October 25th for the National Geographic Travelers of the Year People's Choice Award.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate that from everyone.
Yes, yes, yes. So I guess you can go ahead and share a little bit of background on about yourself. And I'm Black and I travel.
Okay, well, I am on the West Coast here in San Diego. I'm Black and I Travel is the travel blog that I started back in 2009 after I left my mainstream journalism career of 42 years. And it's been going ever since. I'm currently working on the next article for the blog. When that one publishes, that will be the 1,000th post on the blog, which,
Wow.
even as I say it, I can't even believe I'm saying it. But yeah,
That is awesome.
so 5 years and 1,000 posts. I started the blog because I wanted to encourage people to travel, but I especially wanted to encourage Black Americans, African Americans to travel, because we really don't travel, I think, enough, especially internationally. There's an awful lot for us to learn and take advantage of for the improvement of our own lives, and also for the benefit of our community, that we wouldn't necessarily get just staying here at home. And I found a lot of people who, for one reason or another, are leery of stepping outside of that cultural comfort zone here in the United States. The idea of traveling to a place where they may not speak the language, where they may not be familiar with everything in the culture, so on, is, or at least it can be, intimidating to people. And so what I wanted to do was to sort of demystify the whole process of traveling and make it something, a little less fearful for folks, so that they'd be more willing to step outside of that 8 square block box and see the world that they are in fact a part of, because it's as much theirs as it is anyone else's.
Yes, yes, that is so true. And we definitely need to travel as Blacks, as African Americans. Um, so tell people how you came up with the title, I'm Black and I Travel.
Oh boy, there's a story. When I decided that I was going to do the blog, I pretty much had an idea of everything I wanted to do, how I wanted to go about it. I had everything except a title. This happens to writers all the time. You want to write, whether it's a short story, a poem, a novel, you have everything in place, everything in your mind, exactly what you want to do, but you don't know what you want to call it. And I struggled with it for weeks. I couldn't come up with anything that I considered a halfway decent title, and I was just stuck. So my wife came home one afternoon from work, and she told me her story. We had gone that previous spring to Italy for a week around spring break time. This was a pre-planned itinerary. It was supposed to be 3 days in Florence and 3 days in Venice. But as soon as we got there, we had people who were insisting, oh, you've got to go to Pisa. It's only an hour and 40 minutes by way by train. Oh, you got to go to Rome. It's only about an hour and 10 minutes away by train. Now, I'm a train travel nut anyway. So you put me on a train anywhere, and I'm probably going to be pretty happy. But for those two places to be that close to Florence, and we were already in Italy, and for us not to go, it just didn't seem to make much sense. So instead of spending our 3 days in Florence, we spent 1 day in Florence. And so our first full day there, we're jumping on the train to go to Pisa, and that worked out great. It was a really easy matter of just walking down to the train station. It was just a couple blocks away, buying our tickets, jumping on the local train, and just like they told us, an hour and 40 minutes later, we're in Pisa. The next day, we go back to the train station, get a different set of tickets, and we're on one of Italy's high-speed trains at the time. At that time, it was known as the Eurostar Italia. And there are all these people with these palm leaves and these palm fronds in their hands, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. We'd forgotten that it was Sunday, and we'd forgotten that it was Palm Sunday. So an hour and 10 minutes later, we're stepping off the train in Rome, and a 30-minute subway ride later, we are in Vatican City with just the two of us and a couple million of our closest friends on Palm Sunday with the Pope and everybody else. And none of this was planned in advance. None of this was done with the help of a travel agent or anybody else. We just went and did it completely on our own, without so much as the help of a guidebook. So my wife was telling her friends about this, and they were just astounded. We couldn't possibly have done all this on our own. And one of her coworkers asked her then, "Is your husband white?" And
Oh my goodness.
she told me this, and so I got a little panicky for a moment. I checked. I didn't know, no. And then I was like, wait a minute. Only white people can travel like this. Only white people can adapt themselves at the moment and be flexible in their plans and do what they want to do when they're traveling internationally. What the heck? I'm black. I travel, and that ding, the light bulb came on, and that's how I got the title.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's an awesome story. That really is. I mean, it shows that you can have spontaneity in travel and be safe and not have worries and go out and have a great time.
Oh, exactly. In fact, I was asked specifically by some friends of mine after we came back from this trip if they thought Italy was okay for African American women to travel in. And yeah, I did make some observations, and what I observed is if you ever in your life want to have the feeling of being treated like a rock star and diva put together, go to Italy. Yeah, you'll
Wonderful,
have
wonderful.
everything but paparazzis following after you. It's amazing. Um, Now, the fellas, I don't know what to tell you. Well, for one thing, the wife was with me, so that was just completely out of the question. But aside from that, no, there's something about African American women, Italian men just lose their minds.
A lot of men around the world are pursuing African American women. I talked to Renee Evans of I Love to Globetrot, and she
Yes,
is in Sydney, Australia, and
right.
she said that they love interracial dating. She's turning down dates. I said, "Oh my goodness, there'll be a stampede of women over there just to experience that."
I
So
suspect pretty much the same is true in Italy also.
yes, yes, yes. So let's talk about the Ebola scare and the effect that it has had on Africa, travel to Africa
Right,
in particular.
right. Well, as we know, Ebola has affected primarily three countries in West Africa: Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. But the hysteria over Ebola has covered pretty much the entire continent. I was just talking with a friend of mine this morning in Ghana who is a tour operator there and was telling me about the European clients that he has lost for the fall because of this. Ghana is not impacted by Ebola. It's even crazier than that. There are people in Uganda who have canceled trips. We're hearing about people in South Africa, as far away as that, who've canceled trips. And South Africa, to my knowledge, hasn't had a single case.
I
But
agree. Yes, yes. I talked to somebody today and they tell me that they're planning a trip to Egypt and people are canceling to go to Egypt.
I'm hearing the same thing from guys I'm working with there. They are having a very tough time trying to get tours sold, trying to keep reservations intact once they've been made. And Egypt, as we know, has had a really tough time with their tourism over the last 3 years or so, ever since the Arab Spring began. And they have just come out of that political turmoil. The State Department has dropped all of its travel advisories and warnings concerning Egypt. There is nothing in force for that. So, really, there's no good reason not to visit Egypt if you want to. But the people are just freaked out over Ebola to the point that they don't even want to go anywhere near the entire continent which is really unfortunate because it deprives people of some wonderful travel opportunities. It's depriving a lot of people in the various countries where Ebola is not in place of a livelihood. And honestly, the whole thing is kind of ridiculous. I was seeing somebody had put a meme up. I'm not sure if it was on Facebook or if I saw it someplace else, saying that more Americans have been married to Kim Kardashian than have died of Ebola.
I saw that on Google Plus. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. So if any of our viewers want to ask Greg a question, you can just type it in on YouTube, and you're welcome to join in the conversation with us. So we're talking about the Ebola scare and travel to Africa. Or if you have a comment, yeah, please go ahead and just put it in there. So yeah, I did see that too. And so you were in journalism for 42 years. Can you, I guess, explain or do you have any comments, I guess, about the American media perception of making Africa a country, the way that it's, yeah, written about and spoken about by journalists?
Oh boy, how many days have we got here? Uh,
Well, we have 45 minutes or so left.
uh, Actually, the general failure of mainstream media in reporting Africa to the Western world in general and Americans in particular is really an extension of the overall failure of this country to educate people where Africa is concerned. It comes from that. People go into journalism coming out of schools, coming out of colleges, universities, knowing virtually nothing about Africa. That has been the case almost forever. And they bring the ignorance with them, and they perpetuate that ignorance on the job. The other real problem where journalism, where news media are concerned, and vis-a-vis Africa, is that American news organizations have very few, if any, journalists on the ground in any of the African countries. They don't put the people into it, they don't put the money into it, they don't put the effort into it. The argument that you will hear made is that, oh, our audience isn't really interested in that. Our audience isn't really interested in Africa, so we just have to put our resources into the things that our audience wants to hear about. Well, when I came into the profession back in the late 1960s, I came in with the naive notion that the function and the duty of news organizations was to inform their audience, not basically tell them about the things that they already know about or just what they want to hear. And I spent the last 42 years learning that wasn't exactly the case. In some fairness to American news organizations, reporting on Africa in depth is really a difficult process in terms of logistics and it is expensive. You know, I can't lie about that. Communications is a challenge in several places up and down the continent. So it's not easy. But at the same time, the things that you deem to be important are the things that you're going to put your effort into. That you're going to put your, you're going to put your people into it. You're going to put your money into it. And for reasons that, like I said, we need about a day to get into, American news media tends not to think of Africa as being important unless A, there is some sort of crisis underway, such as Rwanda or Darfur in more recent past, or Ebola in the present, or there's some discussion about natural resources that Africa possesses that someone in the West or in the U.S. is interested in. That actually has come up within the context of Ebola. One of one of the more interesting stories you're seeing reported now in the context of Ebola is on the impossible impact, not the actual impact, but the potential impact of the Ebola outbreak on cocoa production, on cocoa prices.
On cocoa prices in what countries?
Not in Sierra Leone, in countries that are neighboring Sierra Leone. I've forgotten exactly which country it is. It's the leading cocoa, one of the leading cocoa producers. But that is what people are focusing on, not the people who are being impacted by this terrible disease. They're worried about, is the price of the chocolate going to go up?
Right, so it's a capitalistic viewpoint, as always, with America. It's not about the people, it's about the money.
The focus is always, the focus is on the money or on the politics vis-a-vis U.S. foreign policy, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, okay.
So if you want to learn anything about Africa, seriously, you're gonna have to go there on you, because our mainstream media are not gonna inform you. They're just not.
That is really unfortunate. But now we have social media nowadays, so we can certainly do it ourselves. So we don't have to rely upon the mainstream media and their shortcomings. So that's the beauty of the internet, of the World Wide Web. Um, so the countries that have, well, just yesterday received notification from the World Health Organization, WHO, Nigeria is now safe to travel to, as well as Senegal. And Senegal is huge for Gorée Island and African American history and travel back to Africa. So if you could talk a little bit about the Africa Travel Association.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Africa Travel Association is a travel trade organization here in the U.S. that's devoted to promoting travel and tourism in Africa. The ATA doesn't sell travel itself. It works with travel agents and airlines and other organizations to try to help them do a better job of selling African travel. They hold an annual Congress in a different African country every year and pull together tourism ministers from all of the African nations, tourism ministers, tourism boards representing the private sector in different countries, airlines, travel agents, tour operators from all up and down the continent. And it's just an amazing experience. They conduct tours while you're there. This year, let's see, next month, the Congress is going to be in Kampala, Uganda, which is actually sort of representative of Uganda really coming back strong in tourism. They had sort of been not just sort of under the radar, but off the radar for many years for a variety of reasons, but now they're coming back, and they've got a great many attractions for people. Um, Everything for, I'm sorry.
So is the Africa Travel Association for, I guess, is it a trade industry organization?
Yes,
Is
it
it,
is.
okay,
Yeah, it is a trade industry organization.
okay, okay. And so what is your, your take on travel to Africa, your personal opinion?
Well, I've got a very specific focus and point of view when it comes to African travel. And the reason for that has to do with the number one form of African travel and tourism, and has been for many years, and that's safari travel. There's nothing wrong with safari travel. In fact, when it's done right, it's one of the most unforgettable experiences of your life. The problem that I have is that safari travel has been greatly overhyped, overmarketed, oversold to the rest of the world, to the point that when you talk about traveling to Africa, visiting Africa, the only thing that comes to anybody's mind is safari travel. And Africa has got so many more attractions, so many more reasons to go there than just safaris. And again, I want to stress there's nothing wrong with a well-done safari. It's fantastic. But there are plenty of other reasons to go. If a safari isn't necessarily your thing, that doesn't mean you should just forget about this continent of 54 different nations. You've got so many other reasons to go. You've got music, you've got art, you've got history, you've got culture, you've got heritage, you've got music, you've got food, religion. I mean,
Yeah,
I would
wine.
say,
They have wineries. I mean, the grapes come from South Africa. I mean, yeah, it's very diverse. Absolutely. Absolutely.
oh, yeah. I mean, I would send people to Ethiopia just for them to have a chance to see the rock churches. I mean, that alone is reason enough to go. You see these 1,000-year-old churches carved out of living rock in the shape of a cross, walls as straight as arrows, and they're carved down 20, 30, 40 feet into the rock. And these aren't just architectural, historical sites like the pyramids or the Sphinx. These are active churches with active congregations still in use today after centuries.
So a couple of our viewers, Tracy Bates agrees with you, and also Reba Crawford, she says she agrees with the idea that people have to go to Africa for themselves. The challenge is getting folks, particularly people of African ancestry, to want to go there. And Reba says amen to what you said as well.
Well, there are a couple of challenges there. The biggest one is the issue of education. And it's not just our school systems or our mainstream media that has kind of fallen down on this. Um, African tourism organizations themselves, they either have a hard time marketing their countries, marketing their attractions over here, or they simply aren't doing it. What you'll see is a lot of tourism ministries from the various countries, a lot of tourism boards. They're pouring into Europe. They make this annual. It's almost like a migration to travel trade shows in London, in Paris, in Italy, and then there's the big one at ITB Berlin, which is the largest travel trade show in the world. It goes on for about 5 days. I can't imagine anybody coming into that thing still standing after all of that. But they pour all of their energy and all of their effort and all of their money into these European shows, trying to bring that European market down into their countries. And very oftentimes they have nothing left to try to market here in the United States. And when you talk to them, they'll all tell you the same thing. Oh, we would love to get more Americans come. We would love to get more African Americans. So we want African Americans to come. But the understanding and the knowledge of what's possible, what's available in these countries, that information isn't getting out. And they have, and they're not over here to do it.
That is
So
so true. That is so true.
it's one of the big
And
challenges.
yeah, so Reba's comment was that yes, those churches in La Belia are a sight to behold. The churches that you were talking about that were carved in stone. Yeah. So she mentioned the place.
Oh yeah.
I went to the World Travel Mart in London. I believe it was last year,
Hmm.
and it was amazing to me to see the East African countries come together, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and there were two other ones, and they formed, I guess, like an agreement, a pact, and they they are creating it so that I guess Africans only need one visa to visit the five countries. So even within Africa, there are challenges for Africans who wish to visit or wish to travel inside of Africa. So, um,
Very, very much so. One of my good friends from Senegal was telling me that he often has an easier time traveling between Senegal and the United States than he has traveling between Senegal and another African country. And he finds that just incredibly frustrating. I can't imagine. I would probably lose my mind if I ran into something like that. Um, that what the East African countries are doing with a common visa is an idea that is gradually starting to take hold on the continent. The same thing has been happening in West Africa for a few years now. The 14 countries of the West African sort of common market organization known as ECOWAS. They have their common visa as well. Um, I don't know if any of the Southern African countries are looking at doing this anytime soon. I hope they are. It's something that really needs to happen. I mean, anybody who's traveled to Europe since the European Union formed all, their common visas knows how easy it is and how cost effective it is to be able to travel around a continent on a single tourist visa. So that's something that I think would really help Africa a lot.
yes, I agree with you. So the countries that you would encourage people to travel to at this time, I think Tracy had mentioned Ivory Coast. We haven't covered the Ivory Coast. So the Ivory Coast, Senegal, um, oh, Nigeria. I know they say don't go, but I went. I had back there. I thought Nigeria was amazing. It's the former coast. So they do no more than just Goree Island.
Right. Well, if
Yeah.
you can get into Senegal, you've got the fringe benefit of having the Gambia just a few hours drive away, or you could take the ferry, I believe, from Dakar down to Banjul, the capital of the Gambia. Uh, the Gambia is an extremely small country. In fact, it's the smallest in Africa, both in terms of area and in terms of population. The advantage you've got there is that, unlike Senegal, the Gambia is English speaking. So language is not going to be an issue at all there. You have some English speakers around in Senegal as well, but in the Gambia you have many more. It's much less of an issue with the language. Uh, Being so small, you really have an easy time sort of getting around the country. You've got almost the entire length of the Gambia River to go exploring, and there are ferries that go up and down almost the length of that. Uh, One of those ferries makes a stop in Jufere, which is the village where the author of Roots traced his ancestry. And I'm sorry.
Okay, so Tracy made a comment. She said, please tell us more about Traveler of the Year and if there's a trip being planned for 2015. So Tracy, if there's a trip being planned with Greg, is that your question? And she also said in her other comment that the Ivory Coast was in response to the #1 leading cocoa producer. That's
Ah,
why she made that
that's
comment.
okay. Yeah, right.
Yes. So is there a trip being planned for 2015? So are you planning a trip, Greg?
Well, I've always got trips in the back of my mind someplace. There is one that I definitely wanted to do next year to Washington, D.C. I'm having to revise the plan. I wanted to put together a trip, a group to go to D.C. in conjunction with the opening of the National Museum of African American History and Culture that the Smithsonian is building. Um, I, that's almost like a command performance. I think you got to be there for that.
I
I,
agree. Oh, wholeheartedly. I was watching them build that. And Tracy agrees too. She said yes.
so I want to put together something for that. Um, I would love to take a group to West Africa from the United States because it's so relatively easy. Your direct flights from the U.S. to the continent tend to all funnel into West Africa, but that actually makes it relatively easy. Dakar, for example, from Washington, D.C., from Dulles is only about 7.5 hours. 7.5 hours is a relatively easy flight. I mean, you're not talking about 10, 11 hours from London or Paris to the West Coast, or 14 or 15 hours from LAX to Hong Kong, let's say. So it's not nearly as hard on you physically. And being relatively closer than those other destinations, the cost can be kept to a reasonable level. And the West African nations are very comfortable dealing with visitors, tourists. They do it all the time. They love to receive people. Very friendly. The Gambia, they'll tell you that the nickname for their country is the smiling coast of Africa. And it really is true. Uh, you will have a lot of people when you visit these countries greeting you like a long lost prodigal relative. It can be very emotional, but it's also a wonderfully positive experience.
Okay. So Reba made a comment. She said she totally agrees with the idea of a visa for travel within the African continent. She thinks that is a great idea. And that would make it so much cheaper for us to go and to visit more countries in Africa instead of having to pay $100 per visa to, to go
Exactly
visit the
right.
country.
Exactly right. That's one of the challenges when you're trying to visit multiple countries in an African region in a relatively short period of time because, we Americans, we don't get a whole lot of vacation time anyway compared with other Western nations. So a lot of our leisure travel is dash in, see as much as we can, as fast as we can, and then go home. So if that's how you're having to do it, then having to stop and get a different visa at each border crossing, and having to pay $100 or $100+ each border crossing, really sort of makes things difficult. And that can happen not just in Africa, but in a lot of places around the world. And that is, by the way, as a direct result of U.S. government decisions in the wake of 9/11. I'm not sure how many people are aware of this, but there are a lot of countries around the world where in the past, prior to 9/11, you didn't have to pay for a visa or pay for an entry fee or an exit fee from the country. And the U.S. didn't charge citizens from a lot of other countries for that either. Well, in the wake of 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security was created. The TSA, everybody's favorite travel security organization, was created. And all of that has to be paid for. And so the decision was made in Washington to impose visa fees and other fees on foreign visitors to the United States as a way of paying for this new heightened security. Well, a lot of countries took that as being sort of a slap at their citizens, and so they started imposing similar fees on American visitors strictly as retaliation. And so that's one of the reasons you see a lot of these fees around the world, and Africa is a part of that.
Yes, it's always reciprocal. Whatever, I guess, formalities that we set forth for, say, for a person to come from Senegal to the U.S., then it's the same for us to go to Senegal. So whatever we're instituting, so if it takes, I don't know, 30 days for visa, then it's going to take us a long time to get a visa to go there as well, unfortunately. So that is just what they tend to do. And go ahead.
No, you're exactly right, and it really can complicate your travel plans. You've got to try your best to get all of your visas lined up before you leave the country and before you arrive on the ground in Africa. And it makes it really difficult to do what you can do in Europe and just sort of be spontaneous and adapt your plans on the fly. It's a lot harder to do that. You sort of have to stick to the itinerary that you've already created.
So Reba has a question. Have you ever visited a country in Africa where the visa was a challenge to obtain?
No, I haven't. But I have to sort of put an asterisk with that because when I've been there, I haven't been by myself. I've had friends from the countries I was going to who knew the system and who knew their way around and knew how to obtain the visas with sort of a minimum of hassle. Even then, it would take hours, but it took hours and not days, and I think that's the main difference. If I were trying to do that on my own, I might still be trying to get out of the country in some cases. So I have to credit my friends there who understand how things work and know who to talk to and how to make the system work more efficiently to get the visas. And it really does make a difference having contacts on the ground.
I agree with you completely. When I went to Nigeria last year, I had to get help from a Nigerian here, actually Awesomely Lovey. She helped me to get my visa in Washington, D.C. because it was just such a challenge. Because, well, we give Nigerians a hard time when they're trying to come here, so they kind of reciprocate. And I mean, I completely understand, so you kind of have to know somebody. You have to write a letter. They have to write a letter. Somebody has to vouch for you in order
Right.
for you to go. And I guess we're doing the same thing. So the Nigerians, I mean, they're such gracious and hospitable people, but we mistreat them. I mean, we talk about them, like everybody's a scam artist, and that is not true. They are very, very entrepreneurial people,
Mm-hmm.
very wealthy. I mean, the wealthiest woman in the world comes from Nigeria, so they're very proud people. And the media, unfortunately, has just everybody thinking that they're all scam artists, but they are some of the most well-traveled people in the world. They're all over the world creating businesses.
That's
So,
true.
yeah, yeah.
Their national flag airline, this Arik Air, is one of the few international African airlines allowed to fly directly to the United States. I think there are no more than about 4 or 5 of them, and Arik Air from Nigeria is one of those.
That is a good point. Yes, they fly to New York. So, yes, Eric Air, yes,
So
that is
let's see,
very,
you've
very true.
got Arik Air from Nigeria, you've got Ethiopian Airlines, you have Egypt Air, and South African Airways, and I think that's about it. Unless Kenya Airlines is flying it now, and I don't think they are.
No, I don't think they are either. But definitely Eric Air, yeah, and South African Airways has always been one of the larger ones. So, yes. Okay, I totally agree with you. So, what are some ways that we can get more African Americans to travel to Africa and not be afraid of this Ebola? Because actually, last year, travel to Africa decreased, I think, by 0.6%, and it's only maybe about 350,000 Americans that actually even went to the country, and it's going to be even less this year because of care
Oh,
if we
yeah.
don't turn things around.
Right. That is really the major challenge right now. One of the things that I wrote about on my blog was for people who were really panicked over Ebola to let them know that if you are so concerned about this that you want to avoid West Africa in its entirety, you have that option, but you still got the rest of the continent to explore. I mean, we're talking about a continent of 54 nations, the overwhelming majority of which are not affected by Ebola in any way. You're talking about regions the size of the continental United States. I mean, Africa is a continent that could contain the continental United States twice and still have area left over. So you've got all of North Africa as an option. You've got Central and East Africa as an option. You've got Southern Africa as an option. Not just the Republic of South Africa, but you've got Botswana, you've got Tanzania, you've got Angola, you've got Mozambique, you've got Zimbabwe. You have all of these different countries. You've got Ethiopia, you've got Kenya, you've got Morocco, you've got Tunisia, these are, of course, uh, Uganda. Yeah, so many options, so many choices, and again, so many different themes you can focus on in these various countries. I mean, Uganda, for one example, in this country that's maybe the size of Oregon, barely, but they've got something like, I don't know, there's 54 different ethnic groups living within the country. That's 54 different cultures for people to explore, experience, get to know. So you've got plenty of options if you just are absolutely determined to avoid going anywhere near Ebola infected or Ebola impacted areas on the continent. And even in West Africa, you've got options. You've got Ghana as an option. You've got Senegal as an option. You've got the Gambia as an option, as we've already talked about. You have Nigeria as an option. In fact, if you don't even have to set foot on the continent at all, because you've got the Cape Verde Islands off the coast of West Africa, and Cape Verde has never been affected by this current Ebola outbreak. They have their own airline, and come to think of it, their airline flies to, that's the fifth airline, they fly directly to the United States. and it's one of the more beautiful tropical island nations in the world. You've got the Seychelles, you've got Madagascar, So you've got tons and tons of options, tons and tons of possibilities that don't take
Okay.
you. That
So
don't take
we have a couple of more comments. Okay, so Tracy Bates wrote, please tell us more about Traveler of the Year and what travel organization you would recommend. And Reba's comment, the same with getting a Ghanaian visa. Someone had to write us a letter of invitation. So sometimes, yes, in order to go to various African countries, you do need someone to write you a letter. So if you could tell us more about Traveler of the Year, Greg. And
well. Um, Traveler, that is an annual award made by National Geographic Traveler magazine, which is distinct from the regular National Geographic. Right? Every year they select 10 either individuals or families or that they feel travel with, to use their words, passion and purpose. Um, I don't know really how the process works. I don't know how you are nominated for this. I mean, to this day, I still don't know who nominated me. Uh, they've only been doing this for this is the third year they've done it. They started in 2012. And you're just minding your own business, and all of a sudden this email pops into your mailbox saying congratulations. For a moment, you're wondering if this isn't one of those Nigerian Prince email things, but as it turns
oh,
out,
there
it's
you go now.
real.
Don't start that. Well,
uh,
you're very deserving. You're very deserving, Greg. So that's phenomenal. So I've been voting for you every day, and I hope everybody else joins in as well in voting for you to
thank you.
become
Appreciate
People's
that.
Choice Traveler of the Year. And so, can you answer the other part of Tracy's question? Tracy Bates wants to know what travel organization would you recommend?
A travel organization in terms of promoting travel to Africa.
Yes, I would believe so.
Okay. Well, really, the organization that's at the forefront of that in this country is ATA, the Africa Travel Association. The one difficulty there is that joining can be somewhat expensive. I think their annual dues are something like $100. Um, but there's really nobody doing more than they are for African travel and tourism in general. In terms of specifically promoting Africa travel and tourism for African Americans, that is sort of a cause in need of an organization, I think. Um, I'm not sure
That's
that
a good point. That's a good point. Well, they can always join our group, the Black Travel, what do we call us?
Black
Black
travel industry professionals, or as I like
Yeah,
to call it, B-Trip.
B Trip. Yeah, they can join us on Facebook.
Absolutely. And it won't
Yes, and
cost
and and there are lots of travel agents in our group that are organizing trips to Africa, well, around the world, more than Africa.
That's also true. One of the people that I went to West Africa with is a travel agent in Maryland, and actually, they are, I believe, the original black-owned travel agency that was promoting travel to Africa. And so they've got more experience doing it probably than just about anybody. But increasingly, there are more and more travel agents, more home-based travel agents especially, that are starting to look to Africa and starting to connect with tour operators in the various African countries. I'm doing that myself.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so Reba says, we found that people's fears about Ebola are totally irrational. Thanks, CNN. Yeah, and the rest of the media.
Oh
And
yeah.
then she also says, well, I hope you win. I've been voting daily. So Reba's been
Bless your heart
voting for
and
you
thank you.
daily. And Tracy says international travel in general. So, what organizations would you recommend for international travel in general? Hmm.
Honestly,
So,
I don't.
Tracy, do you mean international travel for consumers?
Uh-oh. I think we've lost audio here.
No, okay, I muted myself.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
so Greg, answer about international travel in general. She has not put anything else up here, I guess. So she
Okay.
hasn't answered yet. And we have like 4 minutes, so.
Okay. As far as organizations in terms of marketing or promoting international travel to an African American audience, at the time, at the moment, I don't really see one on the horizon here. The closest thing I think there was to one was a program that American Airlines had put together a few years ago called Black Atlas. They were trying to basically tap into a very underserved African American travel market with that. Um, the program sort of came into being with a lot of energy in the beginning, but I don't really know what happened. I'm not really sure how much of a commitment that the airline really had for this. But I had a feeling that when American started looking to merge with US Airways, that one of two things was going to happen. Either the program was really going to be pumped up, or it was going to be allowed to quietly go away. And the latter is exactly what happened. Um, Not much of an explanation, not much of an announcement.
Well, I can add something to that. As a former employee for American, well, under the AMR, I didn't work for American Airlines recently, but they were bought by U.S. Airways, and so I guess when they went through their budget and tried to decide, I guess if it was, I guess working or not or financially feasible, it was supposed to be a social media networking site for African Americans, but I don't think that it quite succeeded at that. I mean, it did give us, I love the videos. The videos are actually still on YouTube. So if you Google Black Atlas, you can still see the videos. But when U.S. Airways bought American Airlines, U.S. Airways management, which is now the management of American Airlines, decided that Black Atlas would change. It's still there, but it's not a social media networking site. It's more a corporate um, board that talks about what they do in the African American community. So events, I believe Laz Alonso is still the representative,
mhm.
and they may still have like events. Um, but yeah, I guess we need to create one because I don't know that there is an international travel organization for African Americans. And yeah, I guess that's something we need to work on.
Well, the old saying is find a need and fill it. I don't think there's any question but that there is a need. So maybe we need to get busy here.
Yes, yes. And so Tracy said, wonderful, thank you. Yes, and thank you. I hope you win also.
Thank you very much, very kind. And thank you for going to all this trouble of voting every day. I know it's a hassle, but I really do appreciate it.
Oh no, we want to see you succeed. So definitely, definitely, and want to thank everybody for joining us. Greg for agreeing to be our guest this evening. And Reba and Tracy, we want to thank you for commenting. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Janice, for hosting this, and thank you, Reba and Tracy, for coming, and hope to hear more from all of you as we go forward.
Okay. Ciao, Greg. Ciao, Tracy and Eva. Oh, educational tours to Africa. Now it comes up. Reba, if I can get in a cheap plug, Sankofa World Tours does annual educational tours to Africa. Okay. And Tracy says thank you.
Thank you both.
Okay, ciao.